to me you don't know the language. I'm not trying to be offensive.
It doesn't matter. I don't need to know the language to know what the word theos says. I think
Okay.
I think I got it pretty good.
Asking is because you made the comment that because theos is articular in the second clause and not articular in the second clause, therefore it's indefinite rather than definite.
Well, there's the definite article of ho in front of theos.
That's right.
In the
But
first stanza.
in the third clause, it says kai theos ein halagos. And in that case, theos is a preverbal predicate nominative, which means not a God, but is referring to what the word is by nature. And so this doesn't collapse into the confusion that you're talking about, that it would render the word the Father. And it also doesn't resort or resolve to saying that the word is simply something other than or less than God.
No, you're referring to the third clause, right? You're not the second clause, but the third.
Exactly. Do
Okay.
you know what a preverbal nominative is in Greek?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay. Well, that's why I was saying it was apparent to me you didn't know the language. The language is emphatic in identifying the word as God. That's why.
You're going to the third clause. The second clause is, you agree that it's a different structure than the first clause, correct?
But it doesn't have anything to do with what you're talking about.
Well,
in
yes,
in the second clause, when it says ha theos, it's denominating a specific person, namely the Father. In the third clause, when it's used as a preverbal predicate nominative, it's referring to the nature of the word, meaning that
exactly.
He is by nature God. That's why, by the way, the article is not used in verse 6. If you look at John 1:6, referring to the Father, it says theos without using the article, but you wouldn't say it doesn't mean that he's God.
No,
the word theos in Greek means God. That's all that it means.
I know.
And so my suggestion, just let me say this at least. My suggestion to you is, if you're going to try and argue against what has been Orthodox Christianity for 2,000 years, then I do think you should know the language, or else simply listen to what those who do have competence in the language say.
That's how I learned this, is because I listened to scholars debate the subject. You just said that in the second clause.
You haven't mentioned a single Greek grammarian that would agree with that translation. You mentioned Anthony Buzzard, who is not a Greek grammarian.
Listen. I have other people that I can present. I don't remember their names. I just watch the debates.
Name one Greek grammarian for me.
Well, I don't know their names, but I can refer to you.
Well, I do because I've studied Greek, and that's why I'm telling you. I'm just cautioning you.
No, you listen. You were talking and you're saying things, and then you're moving on. You just said in the third clause it was not referring to. You said in the third clause that it was referring to the substance of the word.
It's saying that the word is by nature what ha theos is. That's what that means.
Yeah, but
he is exactly what the Father is.
Okay, so this is where the argument comes in, because some scholars believe that it should have been translated as a God, because
I just refuted that. You're going back to the point that I already corrected you on. It's a preverbal predicate nominative. There is no indefinite article in Greek. You don't say a God in the case of such clauses.
No, okay,
that's simply not true. Well, let me ask you this. I don't think you can follow that.
No, because you're talking over me. I said that there was a definite article before theos in the first stanza where God is used in John 1:1.
Second stanza.
You say second stanza, but the first time God is used in John 1:1, it was a definite article before the word theos.
Yeah, because it's denominating a specific person. The article in this case is denominating a specific person.
Stop right there.
In the third clause, which is the rest of the verse, you were telling the other caller to read the rest of the verse. The rest of the verse goes on to say that the Word who was with God is himself by nature what God is.
Okay,
no. Divine, deity. That's what that means in Greek.
You are saying exactly what I'm saying. I don't understand why you disagree with me.
That isn't what you're saying, because you're saying Jesus is not God.
No, let me finish.
Do you think the Word is a person?
No, let me finish. You said that there was a definite article before theos, meaning that it was referring to the God. That means a specific person, which is why they use the capital which is why they argue that they use the capital letter G in the first presence of God in John 1 and 1. That's why they
The,
capitalize it. That's no, let me
it's
finish.
capitalized in all standard translations in both clauses.
No,
Do
that's
you think, address this question, do you think the word is a person in John 1:1? Is that a title for a person?
do I think the word is a person? No, I think that it's an inanimate object. That's why
Okay,
John used the
so
word word.
why does John go on to say he was in the beginning with God in the very
Here,
next verse?
here is exactly where you have the translational issues because, and hear me out and give me some respect here. You, in the beginning, where it says, in the beginning was the word, John decided to use logos. Logos inherently does not refer to a person. Logos means word in the Greek is an inanimate object. So,
Okay, well, okay, I heard you. Now hear me. Jesus is also called the vine, the branch, the door. Those are metaphors. They're titles for a person. Just because it
I
refers
agree.
to, in other instances, to impersonal things doesn't mean it's not being used as a title here. My question was contextually, it goes on to say, he, the word, was in the beginning with God. It uses the masculine demonstrative pronoun there. This one, hutos, was in the beginning with God. So
Okay.
why does it call the word a he in the next
And
statement?
you know this because you know the Greek. They that word he there in the Greek can be translated as this, and that's what some scholars believe it should have said.
It,
This is in the beginning. No, no, let me finish. Let
it's
me finish. Scholars
okay. Go ahead.
believe that it says that in the beginning was the word. The word was with God. The word was. Some people say a God, and they believe that it should be translated. This was in the beginning with God. Some English versions of the translation said this, and they don't use the word he. When you go
Uh,
down when you go down and if you go down in the scripture where they begin to use the word he, there are scholars that disagree because that Greek word can also mean it. Am I
well,
right or am I wrong?
yeah, you're wrong because,
How
as
am I
I've already
wrong?
pointed out, you
Okay.
keep saying scholars, 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 but you couldn't give me one.
I
I'm
don't
the
know
only
their
person.
names. I hear them
I'm the only
debate.
person.
I hear
Well,
them
if you don't
debate
know their,
James White.
yeah, if you don't know their names, here's my point. There's only one person in the conversation who does know Greek. And so if you're going to contradict that, you simply have to bring a scholar. You haven't. Listen to what it says in the third verse. It goes on to say, all things became through him. Di autou egeneta. That is explicitly masculine. It's referring to a person, not an impersonal thing. In verse
Masculine does
10,
not.
it says, he was in the world. It says he was in the world and the world was made through him, but the world did not recognize him. Clearly, it's referring to a person. In verse
No.
12, it says, to all who received him, to them he gave the right to be called the
No.
children of God, to those who believe in his name. All these masculine pronouns point back to the word in John 1:1. Clearly, the
Okay.
word is a person, and
Well,
clearly the word is God.
now you are making the argument that James White made, but here's the other side of that argument, which
I
you
don't know
being
who.
no, listen, hear me out.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
let you finish. You are
Okay.
making the argument of James White. I have heard James White rebut or talk to other scholars in debate, and this is the way that they articulate it. And they're both are reputable scholars, but people don't hear the other side of it because they believe one side. It says, in the beginning was the word. The word was with God. The word was, some people believe that it's a God. You just said that because it didn't have the definite article in the beginning, it was referring to a substantive description of the word, not
That's
necessarily a person.
No,
Because
that's not what I said. I didn't say anything
you said it. You
about.
said okay.
I didn't say
Let me
anything
finish.
about.
Let me
Okay.
finish because it is described in the first stanza, or you can call it the second stanza. The first mention of the word God was hotheos, which the definite article is in front of, mean the God, referring to a person, a identifiable God. Everywhere in the New Testament scripture, they capitalize and put a capital G because if it says hotheos, it's meaning the God. There are other
That's
places that say theos, hear me out, that say theos, and that's the reason why they lowercase the letters G and God in many other scriptures. And that's some of
Yep.
the contextual translation. Let me finish, and then you can rebut me at the end. You
Okay.
and that's why scholars are saying that it should be translated. And I can show. I don't. It's on my phone, so I can show it. I wish I was on the thing so I can show you the scripture. And all throughout, and I looked at this yesterday. It was scholars and reference points to and the the Catholic Encyclopedia, and all of these different places where they translate it as a God. Now, that has nothing to do with whether Jesus is God or not. That's a translational thing. You go down and it says, and he was God in he was God in the beginning. Now that word he can also mean this or it. In the description or the rebuttal to James White, they said it should read this. This was in the beginning with God. This was with God in the beginning, meaning that this situation that's explained in the verses above, through him, there are scholars that believe that this should be translated as it instead of him, because the Greek word can also mean it or him or this. So they said, and this is a fair argument for anybody that studies the Greek know this, it says through it all things were made. And this is why they believe it, because the word is an inanimate object. So when you're talking about an inanimate object, you can refer to it as it instead of refer to it as he, unless you come in with the predisposition that the word is God. But if you read it, the way it should read is that it was the word, which is an inanimate object, logos, an inanimate object. Everywhere in the Bible, the word logos is used as an inanimate object. It says through it, all things were made. Without it, nothing was made that had been made. In it was life, and the life was the light of all mankind, and the light shined in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. That's what the scripture says, and this is why scholars disagree with this. And then, because when you read it and you read
You said a mouthful. Do I get to say anything here?
Yeah, let me finish.
Okay.
So that's
You're
why
just enumerating a lot of errors.
let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
That's why scholars disagree, because the context in John 1:1 is referring to the beginning of time in Genesis 1, where it says, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. And it was so. God said this, and it was so. And so scholars believe that John was referring to the beginning. That's why he used the word, which was little words that come out of God's mouth that manifested into light being produced and all of the above. The word of God is consistently used. And then it says, and the word became flesh and dwelled. That and to me, that's what I believe. And it seems to be more apparent that he's referring to an inanimate object, meaning that the word that God speaks, God spoke through Jesus Christ. That's why Jesus is called the word of God. That's why Jesus said, it's not my words, but the word of the Father in me I speak. That's the translation that I heard debated, and that makes more sense than trying to say John is actually talking about Jesus, but he never used the word Jesus. He should have used the word Jesus, but why didn't he use the word Jesus? Go ahead.
Okay, so you said it makes a lot more sense, but only if you don't know Greek. Okay, in the Greek language, it's very clear that the word is a person. Saying that the word logos is ordinarily used for an impersonal or abstract thing has no relevance contextually where it's being used here for a person, and I'll tell you why. I have already pointed out that other terms that are otherwise abstract or impersonal, like vine, branch, door, are used as titles of Jesus. In fact, the word light is used for Jesus. It's used for God. God is light. That is an otherwise abstract or impersonal thing, but nobody would deny that in those contextually determined senses, it is referring to a person. The same thing is true of John 1. John 1 throughout uses personal pronouns and other indicators of the personhood of the word, and it emphatically identifies him as deity. So, for example, it says the word was with God, proston theon. It uses a stative verb talking about someone who is in relationship towards another. It's clearly talking about a person. Now, I would say that in verse 2, when it says hutos, this one was in the beginning with God, the demonstrative pronoun this can sometimes be used for a neuter thing, it or what have you. Contextually, though, that can't be what this means, because in verse 3, as I pointed out, well, not only verse 1 is it used with the stative verb proston theon, the word was with God, right? There's not it's not talking about some abstract word existing alongside of a person. It's talking about a person being with another person. But in verse 3, it goes on to say di autou egoneta. That must refer to a person. It's referring to agency. All things were created through him, meaning the word. Verse 10 says the same thing. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, diautou egeneto, the world did not recognize him. It's referring to a person. In verse 12, it says that those who did receive him, he gave the right to be called children of God. It's still referring to a person. So when it says in verse 14, the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. By the way, don't miss that he's said to be full of grace and truth. That's an echo of Exodus 33, where God says that he is full of grace and truth. It's clearly identifying Jesus as God. That's why verse 18 of the prologue goes on to say, no man has seen God at any time but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. He has exegeted or revealed him.
Okay.
That's who the Word is, who has always been with God. And one other thing, because you said a mouthful, you wanted me to let you finish. You still misunderstood the points that I've been making about Greek grammar. Ha theos is not capitalized because it has the article. Theos is used repeatedly in Scripture without the article in reference to the Father. That is just not an adequate reflection of what the Greek language is doing. And moreover, the phrase theos can be used in a definite sense without it having the article. Again, Greek has no indefinite article. A lot has to do with syntactical word order in terms of determining whether it's definite or qualitative. And so I just don't think you know the Greek language. I don't think you should be, saying things that just aren't true. The Christian church has believed these things for 2 millennia for good reason. This is what the scriptures teach. By the way, you also appeal to Genesis 1 to say, because God there speaks the world into existence, this is what John means when he refers to the word. But you easily missed the fact, I'm assuming you've read it, but for whatever reason, the very chapter that you appeal to, Genesis 1, proves a plurality of persons in the Godhead.
No, it doesn't.
Because in that very chapter, God says, let us make man in our image according to our likeness.
And then what does it go on to say? And God made man in his image after his likeness.
Absolutely, because the one God exists in a plurality of persons.
You